Behind the net, centers, flat, tries to Clark, shot, oh, rebound, score! Scored for the game winner at 12 minutes and 1 second of Sunday.
TheFourthPeriod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 59. I'm your host, Isaiah, and the Flyers have had an early shakeup. We're going to talk about it in a special episode. We didn't think we were going to be here this week, but we didn't want to miss out on our O&B audience, and we wanted to comment on the events as they happen. Let's start with Chef, just to say hello, and so we can get rolling. How you doing, man?
Good.
Cool.
Let's get down to business.
Yeah, we want to get down to it. We got a lot of stuff to hash through. We got a lot of reputations to trash. And nobody better than from National Pod and Puck and Brotherly Pod and Puck, Dan the Flyer fan. How you doing, man?
When you need a reputation trashed, I'm your guy.
Oh, no question. Of course.
Damn right.
From TheFourthPeriod.com. He had an off day last week. We forgive him. It was Canadian Thanksgiving. Glad to have back Anthony DeMarco.
How's everyone doing? Yes, busy time in Canada this month. We had Thanksgiving last week, federal election yesterday. Busy times up here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, the Flyers went through a little bit of a mini tailspin, and it's debatable whether they have overreacted or just made a proper adjustment. And you look at what's going on with the team. They had lost, 4 in a row, gents? And they liked their process, as they like to say. They were playing the right way, if you will, but they just weren't getting results. Even taking last night's game into account for as an example, JVR, James Van Riemsdyk, has taken 35 shots without a goal to lead the league. And Claude Giroux, who has points, he doesn't have a goal yet. So the Flyers are shooting like around 5% going into last night's game against Vegas Golden Knights. We'll talk about that. So they bring up Joel Farabee, and Dan, they also bring up Misha Vorobiev. Turinsky goes down. They kind of reshuffle the lines after a bit of a losing streak that I mentioned just a moment ago.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising that they called Vorobiev up, but I think Turinsky had his time. He looked good, but I don't think he is adding overall too much to the lineup. I did like what I saw out of Vorobiev last night. I've watched him with the Phantoms earlier this season. He's having kind of a quietly good season, so it was nice to see he did have an assist last night, and Farabee getting called up is maybe just the kind of spark this team needed. Obviously, he didn't contribute anything last night, but overall, it's a good thing going forward. The Flyers lines look much stronger with those two in than they did previously.
Yeah. And Chef, I think a lot of this is a function of Nolan Patrick being out of the lineup. I mean, the grand plan was get Kevin Hayes, fill that chasm at second center, and give Nolan Patrick the opportunity to get better matchups and maybe actually start playing up to a second line level gradually through the season. That all goes out the window with his migraine problem, and the Flyers have a hole in the lineup. They have Raffle at center, so these moves are kind of maybe more to balance things out.
Yeah, it was more necessary, and it's unfortunate to Patrick. And I know we talked briefly earlier today, and I commented I think 2 weeks ago with what they have in the minors this season down at the Phantoms. It's starting to look like, you don't want to say it, but you kind of sort of have to prepare for it, that Nolan Patrick might be the odd man out pretty soon if he comes back at all. I know we touched on that briefly, but the shuffling the lines, it was definitely necessary. They needed some kind of spark, and Farabee coming up, and whether or not he was 100% doesn't matter. I think, yeah, and I tweeted out today, it was more a statement than the fact he was ready.
Right. Well, that's, with high-end prospects, Anthony, that's a little bit of the roll of the dice. You think about what Farabee had to say in the press. There are a lot of people on Twitter, which, by the way, is not really reflective of what the whole universe is. You wouldn't know sometimes. But, a lot of people thought the Flyers screwed up or made a mistake by not having Joel Farabee. And yet, Anthony, today, when interviewed, or it was yesterday, he said it would have been a reach or a stretch for him to go with the parent club just yet. He was able to work on some things in Lehigh Valley, playing in tight spaces, stick handling, and some other things. And you have to believe there's a lot more meat on that bone in terms of development. And it's a little bit of a gamble if we go beyond that 9-game trial period where the entry-level contract will kick in, and they're going to have to pay him sooner than they would have maybe planned.
Yeah, well, the thing with prospects nowadays is due to the internet and just the day and age that we live in, the casual fan gets so much exposure to their highlights in juniors and in the minors and what have you. And all these high-end prospects obviously dominate their respective junior leagues. And we saw for the last 2 seasons, Joel Farabee, lighting up the USHL, and Morgan Frost dominating the OHL. And then you have a lot of fans just clamoring them to make the team. And we forget that playing in the NHL is a lot different than playing against competition that you're significantly too good for. And we forget that the coaches on the ice see what's best. And, I don't think that Farabee was bad last night. He had a few good looks, flashes in the offensive zone. But you could tell in his own zone, in transition, he still does lack a bit. And I think that going down did help his game. And for a player to come out and admit that, that he himself believed it as well. Because if they didn't, they just would say nothing on the topic. So, yeah, I don't think that there's any harm in having Farabee down in the AHL, even if he is to go back down after this first call-up.
Yeah, no, not at all. That's going to upset fans because, I remember back in the day, I was at the United Center back in the 90s. And if you think about the game back then, the home team would be losing, and somebody in the audience would be there, hit somebody. Nobody's hitting anybody. Today's version of that, Dan, seems to be optimize. The Flyers aren't optimizing. And it's just, I think it's disconnected from reality.
Oh, absolutely. I think fans have played one too many games of NHL 20 where they're used to just, throwing whatever lineups they want to out there and trading, Robert Hagen a first for Steven Stamkos and, having rolling 4 strong lines and 3 pairs of defensemen. In reality, that's not how this happens. There are reasons for moves that are made. There are reasons why Turinsky and Bunneman made the team. The reasons why they signed Stewart. The reasons why they both got sent down. There's more to it than just optimizing a lineup because you feel that's what it should be or what your analytics say. There's more to the decisions at the professional level than just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, there's no question. And when you look at what really evolved after the Calgary game, gentlemen, they go to Edmonton, and that's part of a back-to-back, and that's a really strange game. Anthony, did you catch that game? In
Calgary or Edmonton?
Edmonton.
Edmonton, I turned it off after the contradiction goal.
No, it's okay. No, I actually, somebody in my family had surgery. I had a very late night, and I watched the first part of it. The Flyers are dominating, and then I just fast-forwarded it. The Flyers are just... Every time Edmonton got the puck, Hart let in a couple bad goals. We'll talk about that a little bit. And he was out of there, and it was all about Edmonton's star power. It was about McDavid and Draisaitl. But other than that, the rest of the other skaters just had their way with the Edmonton. And just, Koskinen was up to it. Flyers got a couple late goals, and were left with saying, well, our process was good, but we lost.
Yeah, well, Edmonton put on a show that proved how important it is for your star players to take control of the game. And we have not seen that in Philadelphia. And the Flyers played in Edmonton, from what I watched at least, a very similar game to that they played against Dallas, where their defense, for the most part, was great at closing gaps, forced the attack to the outside, and got the puck out quick. And the Flyers' defense has been moving the puck out of the defensive zone quickly all season long. But in this game in particular, along with the one against the Stars, they would control the puck, they would get into the offensive zone, and they'd throw a few quick shots from the perimeter, and the goaltender would make those routine saves all day. The only difference between the two games is that Edmonton Stars took over and had bursts where they single-handedly put the puck in the net, like Draisaitl on the first one, McDavid on several of them. He had a 5.9. So I think that was just a game, along with the Dallas one, where it isn't always just a good thing to possess the puck if all you're going to do is take meaningless shots and tire yourselves out.
Yeah, no, you have to look at shot quality. Well, I will say shot quality that night versus Edmonton was very good. And then when they played Dallas and lost 3-1, Dallas was desperate. And I think they've won 2 games in a row since then. Yeah, the Flyers couldn't get the puck luck. They didn't do as well with the quality of opportunities, but they lost that one as well, and Carter Hart probably should have had that third goal. Yeah, they got off to a good start, and then Dallas got a couple goals, and again, the Flyers were, what were they, outshoot them like 59-13 or something crazy?
Yeah, it wasn't for lack of effort. It just wasn't. I want to say it's that the team, like, we're noticing the little differences, and I think we're all saying is we know it's changing and it's a work in progress. I think, and we saw it at the beginning of the season when even in preseason. Let's go back to preseason when he went, okay, enough of this bull. Let's send down the people that we know are not going to have a chance to make this team. Clear them out of here and just see what we got. And from that point on, I think they were behind the 8 ball a little bit to try to get this team to its identity of how they were going to play. Now, you're seeing little bits of that, and I do believe it's taking longer than it should. And to Anthony's point, the Stars haven't showed up, but the top line or the top players are just not fulfilling their promises, I guess. And they got called out a little bit, today, and we'll probably speak to that later. But that's the whole point. I mean, you see flashes of it, of the system that's starting to work. Like, you can see they're getting chances. They're better than they were last year. Their chances, they're slowly getting into those spots, especially TK. He seems to be moving well between the dots and getting open, and he's putting himself in a position to score. And so I think we're going to see a flip, not a flip of a switch, but a gradual illumination on a dimmer of how the Flyers play will turn around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're talking about shot quality and things like that, some people it gets a little tedious, but according to the natural stat trick and the Corsica model, the Flyers are way above average. According to the McCurdy model, they're just about average. So they all have their different stats, and I think there's a little lesson in that disparity. But no doubt, last night was a different matter. But I did want to bring up something, and then we're going to talk about the Vegas game. We're going to talk about the Flyers, their standing, who the points leaders, some of the minutes leaders, and things like that. Dan, during that Flyers game, one Chris Stewart was dressed, and he fought Jamie Alexiak. It didn't really help the Flyers, but it was an attempt to do something, and it was a presence in the lineup that, against some teams, it seems to have some kind of function, but for whatever reason, even though he's the 13th forward, it really bothers people. And yet, I thought that the Stewart fight provided more energy, if only for the fans. More than 5 Tyrell Goulbourne call-ups in the past.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people that were very angry that Stewart fought, and I get fighting is a dying breed in the NHL in 2019, but I saw somebody tweet somewhere along the lines of, Chris Stewart, the crowd got energized for 30 seconds and then they went quiet again. Well, they went quiet again because the Flyers suck. That was a brutal game to sit through, and I don't blame the fans for that one. The biggest pop of the night was for Chris Stewart. He did his job. He's out there to be a fourth line grinder, enforcer, and fight every once in a while and energize the crowd, and he did. It's not his fault that the rest of the team can't score and they played a bad game. So I think Chris Stewart's doing the right thing right now, and he's doing his job. It's time for everybody else to do theirs.
And here's the thing. The people that are so upset about Chris Stewart on the roster, look, I'm indifferent. I think they did lose something without having Simmons or Gudas on the roster, and Moran's not playing. Okay. What Stewart does, it's just, against certain teams, you got a lot of young guys on this roster, and unless you're there in the room with a guy who's been around like Chris Stewart, you don't know. And we spoke about this last week with Riley Cote to some degree, even if it was obliquely. Knowing there's that guy, there's a presence on the other side that's going to give you some pushback. In reality, not on the stat sheet, but in reality, it gives guys a certain comfort level. Like they get more room, or they just can puff their chest out a little bit more, or be just less afraid. And there's still an element of that in the game, and it doesn't manifest itself always in a very obvious way. So I trust players when they say, yeah, it makes a difference. I think the players know better than people who look at stat sheets and then complain that the Corsi was only 30%. There's just elements of the game. You have to be around the team. And I trust the players to be honest in situations like this, especially guys that are retired that talk about it. Now, I'm not only talking about guys that used to fight or what have you. There's no question that I've heard players who are scorers, non-fighters talk about this, and they feel like, there's no doubt, I feel like I have more room out there. I've heard that. If I have heard that once, I've heard it 100 times. But anyway, Anthony, any final comments on that?
Several, but no, I'll try and keep it in check. The problem is that analytics were developed in a way to better understand the game. But what they have become is a way for clueless people to understand the game. But they can't understand it on their own. And therefore, they have to hang on to what spreadsheets and Excel tell them, because they can't formulate opinion of their own. So that's why when you run into a lot of people who just regurgitate analytics and percentages and the pi root of an offside to you, is because they don't know how to watch the game and formulate an original opinion. I believe that analytics have a place in the game. NHL front offices would not hire analytics departments if they didn't believe so. So I'd be ignorant to suggest that they wouldn't. But as you mentioned, Isaiah, there is a reality part to this. And essentially what that is not every player is a robot, and having a guy who can throw down around a swarm of 22, 23-year-old players makes that difference. And maybe Alain Vigneault and Chuck Fletcher showed up and said, man, the core of this team isn't really strong. There is not a lot of leadership on this team. We've seen it firsthand with the core players off to a very, ghostly start. And they looked in and said, this guy could just help us intangibly. And whether people with spreadsheets like it or not, intangibles are still a thing. And again, to your point, maybe the coaches and GM know what's best for the team.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to challenge them here if we disagree with them, but I'm sure that we're talking about selected people. I mean, there's some people we refer to a lot who, and we may disagree with them, but who I respect. I know they do watch the game. It's just, it's like confirmation bias. It's like you have an idea about the game, or you think you have an opinion about something, and then you go search for the analytic marker that proves your point, and someone else could come back with something else, with you and without you stuff. And I heard somebody put down WowWee, what they call with you, without you, with you, and say, well, that's not a good measure. And it's like, and then we know that the analytics from just like 3-4 years ago aren't even respected at all. And you think back to all the Twitter conversations you had going back and forth in the past. So trying to wrap this up without getting too tedious, just, it's another tool in the toolbox. It's more information. That's good. But don't act like it's the only information. So let's leave it there.
Your eyes.
What's
the
that?
best thing to trust is your eyes. You watch the game and you can see what's going on in the game. I mean, you can feel the tempo. Watching the game, there's very few sports that, you look at a box score, maybe baseball comes the closest, but where you can actually picture the game in your head. You're never going to be able to picture the game in your head from analytics. I mean, the best thing, you trust your eyes, you watch the game. I mean, like, for all the analytics that is out there and all the heat that Stewart and even Haig took during that 4-game losing streak, you can go back. I can't, by watching those games, and I've watched all of them, I DVR'd them, I've gone back and I watched them, and here's the thing. I can't find out, I can't sit there and say the game was Stewart's fault or the game was Hag's fault. I can't say that the reason why they were on that losing streak was them. It wasn't them, it was a group effort. It's the whole team. But choosing your whipping boys, sometimes your analytics drives you to certain people that don't necessarily deserve it all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, outside of last night, Robert Haig has actually been pretty positive. Yeah. And I said this last show, Haig is a defensive defenseman, and veteran coaches are going to like a guy who is physical in the corners, blocks shots, can work the PK. It's almost like he's going to absorb a lot of punishment. And he's going to shield the other defenseman. The other guy they have on the roster like that is Sam Morin. So, and he'll get a chance at some point. We're going to get back to that. It was Dave Isaac from the Courier Post really wrote a great article today about Sam. And Dan, I'll engage you in that discussion. But I'm going to go to Anthony now, because last night the Flyers finally got the puck luck they needed, plus Brian Elliott just really outplayed Oscar Dansk. I'll tell you, the Vegas Golden Knights don't really have an answer behind Marc-Andre Fleury. Malcolm Subban is hurt. Oscar Dansk looked like Peter Mrazek circa 2018, all over the place. Gave up like at least 3 bad goals. And, Flyers came out strong. But in the second period, Vegas badly outplayed the Flyers, but it worked out for them the third period. Both teams played to the score, and that was it. Flyers finally got their puck luck and a desperately needed victory.
Yeah, well, it's weird because in Dallas, their defense was pretty much rock solid, and they were way more leaky in this one. But I'm sure a lot of that has to do with playing a high-octane offense like the Vegas Golden Knights. But yeah, they still played a good game. And I was happy to see some players get rewarded. Michael Raffle has taken a lot of, unwarranted heat over the last few seasons, and he had a really good game. It was nice to see Chris Stewart chip in with an assist. I thought he subtly had a good game. And to your point, I think he did have a role in keeping Ryan Reeves relatively quiet. There's not enough good things I can say about Matt Niskanen right now. That guy, I'm not trying to compare him to Kimmo Timonen, but he's bringing a presence like Kimmo Timonen, and that I haven't seen on the team in a long time. And it was also nice to see Kevin Hayes get rewarded because, he's been one of the better forwards. I put that out earlier on Twitter, and Dan and I discussed on Brotherly Pod. He's been one of the better forwards and only had a goal to show for it. He's been versatile. He's switched line mates more times than I changed my socks. He's played on top lines. He's played on the top power play, top penalty kill. Now he's in more of a defensive role. So it was nice to see some players get rewarded for the hard work that the team has been putting together for the past few games.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, again, they talked about process, and they augmented that by getting Vorobiev in the lineup as well as Farabee. Dan, do you want to talk about Joel Farabee, his contribution last night, positives, negatives, what have you?
He played a pretty decent game for what I've seen. I've watched him for his couple games with the Phantoms, and he was very solid, easily the best player on the ice other than Phil Myers pretty much every night. And I didn't really notice much. Again, I didn't catch much of that game, but from what I saw towards the end there, I did see he was kind of noticeable there towards the end. So I think he had a pretty good game. If he continues what he did with the Phantoms, I mean, it won't be long before he's a mainstay on this roster.
Yeah, I mean, he should be a top six forward when he has, played to his potential. Chef?
So, yeah, he got over 14 minutes, I do believe. I think he was averaging like 21 with the Phantoms, so it's not too far off. I think he had like 3 shots on net. What I was really surprised, I know the transition wasn't so good. I mean, he looked a little out of place, but he came back and made some good plays defensively in their own zone. So I think all in all, once the jitters are done, I think he's going to settle down a little bit more. Like I said, he might not have been 100% ready, and I tweeted it out, and I know I mentioned it. He was just, I think, like, bringing him up the move was a statement saying, okay, look, to a couple of veteran players. I know we didn't talk about Voracek losing some time, but he did. He got down to 14 minutes. His time was cut. I just think that, hey, look, it's a statement here. We have kids that are willing to work hard and do what they're told, because somebody else said this too. They're young. They don't know any better. They're going to buy into the system. If you don't want to play, we'll replace your time with kids that want to play or want to try. And we got enough talent down there to do it. So I think that was more of a statement. But either way, I agreed with it. It was time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, like we talked about earlier, Nolan Patrick has really forced the hand. I would have liked to have seen Joel Farabee get more time. He sounded like somebody who's really working on stuff. And you know what? This could be a 9-game trial. And, of course, if for people who aren't familiar with the CBA and things like that, if Joel Farabee plays a 10th game as a Philadelphia Flyer in the regular season here, then his entry-level contract begins. And that's a big deal. But a lot of the players the Flyers have to pay going forward. So that's going to play into their calculation, no doubt. Yeah, you got 14 minutes, and Voracek just got, just over 15. So, yeah, and the minutes leader, and Anthony, you were talking about this, Matt Niskanen, 24 minutes, Provorov for 23. So you can see, and Justin Braun, a little more appropriate there with 17 minutes, that they were maybe overplaying him. But you know what it is? This is all part of the early season adjustment. And AV himself said when he took over the Rangers, it took till right around Christmas until he tweaked everything and got everything to where he wanted it.
Yeah, well, another thing that's kind of thrown a wrench into his plans is, the top tier players not showing up. And I think that had a lot to do with the roster shakeup, because if Claude Giroux and Jakub Voracek and James Van Riemsdyk each have 2, 3, 4 goals, I know Voracek has 2, but they're pretty much meaningless in a blowout loss to Edmonton. I don't know if we see the Joel Farabee shakeup, because Carson Twarynski was playing fine defensively. Connor Bunnaman was maybe not quite ready, but he wasn't a liability defensively. And the Flyers were playing excellent defensively and have almost all season. And I would say last night was one of the more leakier defensive games, because Farabee isn't as defensively responsible maybe as those guys. And I think that has forced Vigneault's hand here to try and shake up the roster in a desperate need to find offense if those top guys are going. But to your point on the defense, I think Matt Niskanen has made his life especially easy, especially given the fact that Shane Gostisbehere has struggled as much as he had. But again, I think to your point, it's going to take a while here for Vigneault to figure out what he has in his cards here, and it will take even longer if the top guys can't figure it out.
Yeah, there's no question. So, listen, I just wanted to cover a couple more things tonight. Just a couple of the top leading scorers for the Flyers. Travis Konecny has played 7 games, and he has 4 goals and 10 points. Oscar Lindblom, 4 goals, 6 points. Couturier, 2 goals, 5 points. Provorov with 1 goal and 5 points. Raffl, of course, he's got 3 goals now, and he's going to be happy he's not playing center, and he shouldn't play center if maybe ever again, maybe in a blowout win or loss. And from there on, it's obviously notable that Claude Giroux has 4 assists, and I think Voracek has points in only 2 games and 3 in one of them. And Kevin Hayes has 2 goals, no assists. And, so anybody, Dan, are you worried about Carter Hart? It's only played 5 games, but a couple of the games he's like, again, he gets pulled in Edmonton, wasn't that sharp in Dallas, kind of went sideways in another game, but then he was great in the opener. And in both openers, I thought he was very good.
I'm not worried about Carter Hart long term. This is something that, I love the position of goaltender. I've studied it frequently, and it's not uncommon for sophomore goaltenders to struggle and even have that spill over to their junior year and kind of struggle. Obviously the kid's not going to play lights out every single night. You're going to have to get used to a couple bad games here and there, and he really hasn't been sharp early on. Lots of goals that I'm sure he wants back, but long term I'm not concerned, but short term I did expect some growing pains here, and I think that's all this is. I'm sure he'll bounce back sooner or later.
Yeah, and because, like we talked about, this whole season rides or dies on whether Carter Hart can play 50 games. Because we know Brian Elliott can't. And if you start stretching Brian Elliott past like 35 games, you're going to see a mixture of a guy who could get hurt or a guy who just can't play to a level good enough for them to make the playoffs. So I really like the decision to not play Carter Hart, let him work with the coach. That's what we talked about with Kevin Woodley when we had him on. The guy's going bad. Don't just force him out there and get 80% of what he is. Let him work with the coaches. The system that they're teaching with the head tracking and puck tracking and all that stuff is very specific. And if he starts falling outside of certain parameters, they can correct that. And hopefully that's what Carter Hart's doing right now with goalie coach Kim Dillabaugh. So, the Flyers today, Chef, instead of having a regular practice and having back-to-back practices before the Flyers play in Chicago, the Blackhawks, they had a skills coach come and have like a 25, 30-minute session with a lot of the players. And the players seem to take to that because they're going to have a full-fledged practice tomorrow. And they worked with this guy, Ricci, and I got some good feedback in some of the articles that we read with the beat writers.
Yeah, Coots really praised it. He said it was really neat. I think, once in a while you have to shake it up, like, give a little more private, like, attention to here and there and see where you can tweak people's games and maybe help them out. So that was good. Maybe they did something with Elliott, because Elliott, last night, he did look great. And it begs the question, maybe he is fully healthy this year, and his movement from left to right last night in the net showed that. He was back to where he was before he went down with that injury. So, maybe they're working with everybody here and there, and they can tweak these little things and maybe fine-tune it.
Yeah, I think Elliott is who he is, and the main thing is to keep his number of games down. Because just when you think that he's going to be some kind of savior, or even over a short period of time, he'll let you down. He'll give up a bad goal. He's a perfect backup goalie if he were like 2 or 3 years younger. Right now, I'm still kind of like on pins and needles with him. But Anthony, I just wanted to mention one thing. and we can wrap up the prospect argument about who's ready, who's not ready. And what do you think of this statement? Just because player X in the NHL lineup isn't very good or a player that you like doesn't mean prospect Y is necessarily ready or that it would be good to bring him up if we're talking about his long-term development. And I tweeted something like that out, and it really drove a couple people nuts, but most people seem to agree with me. Your sentiments?
Well, take the Toronto Maple Leafs, for instance, and we know that their defense has been a long-standing Achilles heel for them. They have a young man in their system on defense by the name of Rasmus Sandin, a blue-chip prospect, former first-round pick. He just got sent to the AHL, and it was either Mike Babcock or Kyle Dubas, or maybe even both, who mentioned there's no point in keeping him up here to play 10 to 12 minutes a night, and in the long run, this is going to benefit him. And I think that's what people fail to understand, because as I mentioned before, they see what these kids are doing against junior and minor league competition, and they think they're going to come in and set the world on fire. We saw it with Carson Twarynski and Connor Bunnaman, that people didn't think they were ready. And you know what? The debate is out, especially on the latter in Bunnaman, on whether or not they were ready. But then they think that prospect Y, in this case Joel Farabee, is going to come in and set the world on fire. And we forget that, A, is this guy, is he the difference between this team winning and losing games? And B, is that worth possibly stunting his future development? You know, that argument could have been made with Nolan Patrick. We've seen that with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. You know, these things actually happen. Sam Gagne, another one in Edmonton.
Luke Schenn.
And, yeah, there you go, Luke Schenn. When players are forced and especially thrusted in a premier role, it does sometimes result negatively. And Joel Farabee is not a breed of Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews. We have to temper expectations here.
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to drill down on this because I really feel strongly about this. And Joel Farabee, one thing I don't want him to be is the kind of guy who he's all right. He's in a third line position. He's got to play well defensively, so that's good. He's going to be with Kevin Hayes, and who they have on that line, Lawton as well.
Yeah, on the left side.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't want February to come. He's still here. He's not really scoring, and he's just become like a defensive forward, like a glorified Scott Lawton. You know, he might get better looks and all that, but it's almost like the grind can catch up to players, and they run into a wall. And then now as the LC is in effect, he's not getting as much time because veteran coaches, I don't care who you are going to get to a point where he's only going to get 9-10 minutes a game, and then all of a sudden he gets sent back down. And that could have been development time, and by then he could have been ready. That's what I'm worried about. I hope Joel Farabee is not that guy, but we're not going to know until, you know, mid-season if he's still here, how that works out. But
if I could chime in for a second.
Yeah, because I'm going to go to Dan after that.
Yeah, just quickly, you know, I'm in Montreal, and they kind of did this routine with Jesperi Kotkaniemi last year, and former third overall pick in the 2018 draft. And, you know, in March of last season, Claude Julien was actually having to scratch Kotkaniemi because, as you mentioned, the grind got to him, and it just proved to be too much for a kid that clearly maybe wasn't physically ready for this grind.
Right, exactly. And to his credit, because he played in college and a USHL schedule, Joel Farabee, even though he's only 19, has had more time to bulk up his physique and get a little more, muscle on it. And with professional trainers, you're not just going to eating ice cream or something. But so I think we've kind of killed that one. Dan, I wanted to turn to you because today in the Courier Post, Dave Isaac, was talking about Sam Moran. I don't know if he got a chance to see it, but I know that he's someone you had a lot of passion for as a player. And AV just said, look, we're going to play him, but he's got to be patient right now because nobody's played their way out of the lineup.
I think it was after the Edmonton game, maybe. there was a quote by Alain Vigneault about Shane Gostisbehere, and it essentially was talking about his process and how he's going through and kind of learning each player's individual strength and weakness, especially on the blue line, and figuring it out. And that quote right there kind of said, all right, no matter how bad Gostisbehere plays, Moran's not going to get a chance unless he completely gives up on him until otherwise noted. So I think that's why Haig and Gostisbehere have not been cycled out yet for Moran. It's a damn shame for this kid that he just can't find a way into the lineup one way or the other here. But I really wish they play him and give him a chance, because it's been, 6 years and we still don't know what he brings to the table. And him sitting in the press box isn't helping anybody. So it's a shame that he can't find his way into the lineup.
No. So
hey, can I jump in real fast?
Yeah, sure.
I just got a question. Why does Ghost get like a free pass from the Flyers Twitter? I mean, it seems like he has been, like, his mistakes have been more predominant, led directly to 3 goals, maybe two, maybe 3 goals in the Edmonton game alone. His mistakes stick out more than Haig and Stewie put together. Like, his are bigger. They're big whoppers. And he seemed to get this free pass. I really, and I know we joke about with the whole Big Sam thing, but he really should get a chance to get in there and show something at a level, at least to this point now, if it continues in this direction.
Well, the only thing is that Shane Gostisbehere has had a 60-point season. I mean, he's been an offensive weapon on the power play. The power play is still a work in progress, and you can only go by what's happened in the past with a fairly young player, should be in his prime. Shane Gostisbehere, and we saw him the other night, used as a one-timer option in the configuration they were using in that particular game. I think it was the Dallas game. It's easier to just say, hey, listen, Shane Gostisbehere has had 2 just like spectacular seasons offensively. Really, 2 really good ones, and a couple other ones that were in that 40-point range. So, it's that's why I think they're trying to tap more out of this player. Anthony, I think you should just take this point to comment about the TFP rumor mill. And I was listening to Dave Pagnotta and Dennis Bernstein on the Hot Stove Show. Check that out on Sirius XM radio on the weekends, and it's also podcasted along with the kings of the podcast for the LA Kings with DB and the mayor John Hoven. But they were talking about Shane Gostisbehere. His name's still out there, and Montreal's still calling about him among other teams. Any further information beyond that?
You sure want me to say something? Because when I brought this up in June, I was supposed to try it.
But you know what? It was verified by other sources, so we're past that now.
Yeah. So, I was just kidding around. But, if you look around the league, there's no team that needs a puck-moving left shot defenseman more than the Montreal Canadiens to play with Shea Weber. So the fit is there. The problem is Marc Bergevin is a notoriously stingy general manager. Because a lot of you look at the Montreal Canadiens, and there's 4 forwards that would fit like a glove on the Flyers right now. Brendan Gallagher, Max Domi, Jonathan Drouin, and to a lesser extent, Phil Danault. None of those 4 are getting moved. So then you have to go down the line a bit, and Paul Byron's name is out there. Which is a guy who I linked to the Flyers back in June. And basically, I don't think that Byron is a fair enough return. A guy maybe reaching into his early 30s now, 3 years left on a contract at $3.5 million, but does provide a lot of versatility. But to the same point, what has Gostisbehere done to justify getting more than a Paul Byron? He's become an overpaid, one-dimensional, third-pairing defenseman who can't defend and is struggling to put up points. And, a lot of people have called him a one-trick pony. So, I've said on numerous occasions, I think people overestimate how much value Shane Gostisbehere could bring. But I still do think there's a significant connection with the Montreal Canadiens. But at this point, it's just, would it be worth it for Fletcher to sell low on Shane Gostisbehere? Or is this just really what he is, and he plateaued at a very young age?
I I think we're going to give this a hell of a lot more time because, I think the alternatives, obviously, I could envision a scenario where Ghost is moved and Myers is brought up. That's easy. But the problem is Ghost has to be able to bring a premier price. And I just think it's just too early as Ghost tries to find his way. And I think he realizes that with this particular management group and this coaching staff in particular, and all this other thing in the past that he's had aren't going to be acceptable. And I think he's making a real effort to adjust and bring the most out of his game. Let's give this a little more patience. But yeah, it's out there, and Dave Pagnotta has proven to be pretty reliable, and certainly at thefourthperiod.com. DB has good stuff as well, so check out thefourthperiod.com. And just a couple more items before we call it a night for this special edition of the O&B Puckcast. AV came out today and said about last night, Dan, 3 of the 4 lines were really good, and that Couturier line with Oscar and TK will be kept together. They're just like hand in glove. They just fit perfect. And the Hayes line that we referred to earlier was a 200-foot game, and even the line that had Chris Stewart, who maybe Pitlick next time, with Vorobiev and Raffle was good. But Jake, and JVR got to figure some things out.
Yeah, I saw those quotes, and I'm glad that he sees a lot in that second line with Couturier, Lindblom, and Konechny, because I think they've been the best line throughout this season. And they seem to be putting Hayes down there, maybe giving him more chances with a different group and letting the 3 that haven't been able to play very good hockey right now, which is JVR and Jake, put them together on the top line and, kind of leaving those 3 as the odd man out at the time being as far as what he considers good. And I agree with him. I think that they're not necessarily playing bad, but they need to figure it out. They need to get their goal scoring together. And until they do, maybe just put kind of the misfit island of the dolls over there and let them figure it out together. So I like what he's saying. I like the lines, and I generally agree with what he's saying, especially that second line, which has been extremely solid.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the thing is, this underscores, Chef, that G is just not a top-line center anymore. This is why he wants to stay on the wing. And again, we harken back to the loss of Nolan Patrick and the impact of that. So you have 3 guys that are struggling a little bit, and this might. I was saying with Charlie O'Connor, I was going back and forth. I was like saying, what's going to happen if Patrick is in and out of the lineup or he can't come back. We might be waiting for Morgan Frost to come in and move G to the wing. Who knows?
Yeah, well, we met up earlier today briefly, and we talked about that. I said I would be happy with him staying down 20-25 more games. I was worried now because somebody tweeted out, look who's next. And, because Frosty had 1 goal and 4 assists, or 3 or 4 assists, and they were already like, bring him up with Farabee. I'm like, no, he needs a little more work. We talked about that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, like, it kind of jamming him up. I really want to see G back on the wing. But, this being down a center and with nobody quite ready to call up right now, I think it is throwing a wrench into the plans. But I will say this, though. JVR is snake bitten as a son of a gun, but I mean, before they even, I think, mentioned it in the game last night, JJ, but I noticed it before he even said anything. His back checking has improved greatly.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems like he has been playing, his defensive game is a lot better than it was last year. And if he can just get that, I think it'll be for him in particular. G, he's more of a setup guy anymore. But I think if JVR can get that first goal and get that friggin' bad voodoo off his stick or whatever, he should go and have it exercised or something, and get it off there or break it and get a new one or whatever. As soon as he can get that, I think they'll come regularly. I think it's just a confidence thing right now.
Yeah, 35 shots, no goals, leads the league. He's a streak scorer. I think he's going to work it out. He's getting really good chances. It's just a matter of time. So I just wanted to leave people, again, I want to refer back to that Isaac article before we go. It was primarily about Sam Moran, but if you haven't seen it, he talked about how Kevin Hayes his career was almost over. he had a knee injury that resulted in a blood clot, and he had to have like 4 surgeries, and he had to sit out a season. He was in the hospital for 18 days, and this is just from a knee-on-knee against the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, so when Hayes was at BC. So I had never heard that story. So it just goes to show you that these guys live on a knife's edge, no pun intended. He really came close to. They were worried about, they might have to amputate his leg. So,
wow.
Great story. Check it out again, Dave Isaac, the Courier Post of South Jersey. With that, it's just a quick schedule update. Tomorrow night, Thursday night, the Flyers will travel to Chicago, and then they play the Columbus Blue Jackets on Saturday. It's back-to-back, so on Sunday they play at the Island. Then it's Tuesday the 29th at Pittsburgh. Then they have a couple days off. They play at the New Jersey Devils on a Friday, November 1st. And Toronto, Saturday, home game on the 2nd. So another back-to-back. I'll be curious to see if Joel Farabee gets sat out for some of those games. We'll see. I don't think at first, but when they have a cluster of games and there's not a lot of rest around it, we'll see what happens with that. That'll be interesting. And with that, I think we covered a lot of ground tonight. Now, one of these days we'll talk about that Spittin' Chicklets, that podcast that Mike Richards did. Great interview, a lot of good stuff in there. We'll talk about Dry Island. Maybe we'll catch that next time. But yeah, good stuff. Dan, the Flyer fan, you with National Pod and National Puck, Brotherly Pod and Puck. Any final words for tonight?
Not really. I just about Morgan Frost. I don't think he's ready. I've been at these Phantoms games and watching him. He's just not ready. He had a great weekend. The first time he actually looked like he can hang at the professional level, but he needs more time. He should not be called up yet just because he had a good weekend. He definitely, especially physically, I don't think he's quite ready for the NHL level yet, let alone the AHL. So that's it. You can find me at Dan the Flyer fan, at Brotherly Puck, at Brotherly_Pod, at National Puck, at National Podnet. I'll be back in 5 minutes with Mike Acito for BBW Radio. Show tomorrow with Dan Silver and Bobby Thomas as my guests on the Angry Negative Show with Angry Jim and I. And we're going to have a fun show about analytics, I'm sure.
Oh, that's going to be a showdown. That'll be fun. Make sure you catch that one. Not that I don't want you to catch the other ones, but make sure you get BT versus Dan Silver. That should be interesting. And looking at thefourthperiod.com, Anthony DeMarco, any final words from you?
All I would say is that fans relax. It's 7 games into a new regime. This coaching staff has A+ across the report card as far as I'm concerned. They have earned our benefit of the doubt. I know you're scarred from the years and years of Dave Haxtell, but trust this coaching staff. The team is playing well. If they make certain personnel decisions that doesn't fit your narrative, maybe you have to rethink your narrative. Don't be so closed-minded. Just be accepting and give this team a chance to prove you otherwise.
Yeah, at least until further notice, and that until you see like an obvious F-up, if you will. Chef, you're at Steam Pub in Southampton. What else can you tell the folks?
Yeah, just come in. Yeah, we run a lot of specials there. We got wings on Mondays. We got burger specials on Tuesdays. We got cheesesteak specials on Fridays. Thursdays, prime rib, and all the weekly specials come out. Friday, it's just big time happy hour, and the weekend we do all the great stuff with all the sports events on TVs and all. So all around, you could get everything there, not just hockey, but you can get a great meal, a great craft beer or regular beer, whatever you're into. We got it, brother. We got you covered.
That's all right. That's great. Dan, I know you got to drop off. No problem with that. And, I'm Isaiah, and if you want to yell at me for things I said today, you can yell at me directly at Isaiah, ISAIAH_520. Don't forget the underscore, Isaiah_520. And, of course, the O&B Puckcast can be followed on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We're on so many formats. If you could give us a 5-star review or rating on Apple Podcasts. We're also on iHeart, SoundCloud, so many. We have our own YouTube channel, the O&B Puckcast. So we'll probably get back with you November the 4th. And until then, take care.